As Jesus approached Jericho, a blind beggar was sitting beside the road. When he heard the noise of a crowd going past, he asked what was happening. They told him that Jesus the Nazarene was going by. So he began shouting, "Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me." "Be quiet," the people in front yelled at him, but he only shouted louder, "Son of David, have mercy on me." When Jesus heard him, he stopped and ordered that the man be brought to him. As the man came near, Jesus asked him, "What do you want me to do for you?" "Lord," he said, "I want to see." And Jesus said, "All right, receive your sight. Your faith has healed you." Instantly the man could see, and he followed Jesus, praising God. And all who saw it praised God too.
Good morning. It's great to be here with you. Thank you so much for having me this morning. I'm just going to dive straight in, and I'm just going to apologise that I'm going to start from a pretty bleak place. But trust me, the message will get better as I go along. I just wanted to start by telling you a story about a friend of mine who died in a road accident a few years ago. My friend was 34 years old. She was cycling to work. And as she cycled to work, she actually was reversed over by a lorry. There's a horrendous accident, and basically the lorry driver just reversed, wasn't really looking. He didn't really have any excuse for what happened, because he had not only rear view mirrors, but those blind spot mirrors. There were other drivers who were like hooting their horns and trying to get his attention, like yelling at him, and he just didn't see my friend until it was too late. And he'd reversed over her, and so he was arrested for causing death by dangerous driving. And when he went to court, obviously he was guilty, so he pled guilty, and the judge said to him, "I need to warn you that when we come back for sentencing, you are facing a custodial sentence. You are going to go to prison for what you've done." Between the judge saying that and the date of sentencing in the court, my friend's parents wrote to the judge and said, "We don't see any point in him going to prison. We would like you to show mercy." It's incredible, isn't it? And so when they came back for sentencing, the judge said to the guy that he actually read some of the parents' letter out in court and said, "They've asked me to show mercy, so I'm not going to send you to prison." He still lost his driving license. There were still consequences for his actions, but he didn't go to prison. And national newspapers covered this story, as well as regional press. But one of the national newspapers had the headline, "Death Driver Shown Mercy." And the reason it makes news, the reason it makes headlines, is because that kind of mercy is so rare, isn't it? It's so incredibly rare. Even many of us in the room, many watching online right now, will be Christians and will know the mercy of God. And yet we're still astonished at a story like that, because it seems so incredible to be able to show that amount of mercy. One of the things that really astonished me was the judge said to the driver, that her parents have recognized how this has affected you. Isn't that amazing? I think if it happened to me, I'm not sure I'd be thinking about how it had affected anyone else other than me. But the parents had recognized how it had affected the driver, and they wanted him to be shown mercy. But more than anything, the reason they wanted him to be shown mercy is because they are Christians and they have known the mercy of God for themselves. I think mercy is a word we don't talk about enough. It's certainly not in public life, is it? Whether you look to politics or the media or debates around whether we should have vaccinations or not, or Brexit, all these sorts of things, I don't think we see much mercy around in those settings. And I find it fascinating that in the Bible passage that we've just heard, that the beggar asks for mercy. It's interesting because I think if I was yelling out at Jesus, there's a whole load of things I might yell out for, especially if I was a blind beggar, before I'd ask for mercy. I might ask for money. "Jesus, have you got any money I can have? Have you got any food I can have? Have you got any water? Have you got any provision for me?" Maybe I'd cry out, "Can you heal me?" The guy's crying out, obviously, because he's heard of this Jesus. He must have heard all the different things Jesus was doing. So he could have said, Jesus, heal me. Jesus, give me my sight. But he cries out and says, Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me. And I wonder if it's actually been true throughout all of human history that mercy has been a bit lacking among people. I don't know about you, but I find that mercy doesn't really come naturally to me. It's something I have to cultivate in my life if I want to be merciful. I find that being judgmental comes really naturally to me. If you ran a discipleship program or a training course on how to be really judgmental, I would not need to come along. I suspect it's the same for most of us. So I don't know, you might all be a lot nicer than I am, but I just find it just comes out of me. It's so easy to be judgmental. It doesn't take any effort, it doesn't take any training, it doesn't take any courses, or I don't have to learn a special skill. It's just something that seems to come very naturally out of my heart, through my mind, out my mouth often as well. Mercy isn't like that for us. I think if we're honest, mercy is so often lacking from our hearts. It's often not our first response in any given situation. But the reason this beggar's request of Jesus is so perfect, is the perfect thing for him to ask Jesus for, is because it's based not on the beggar's own situation, not on his own standing. It's based entirely on the character of God. Entirely on the character of God. This is why coming to Jesus and saying, Jesus, have mercy on me, it's the best thing we can ever say, I think, to Jesus, because he is merciful. It's who he is. I love the fact that in the Bible we see in the Old Testament, in Exodus 34, many of you will know the story, I'm sure, but for those who don't, it's basically about this guy Moses who says to God, show me your glory. He says, show me your glory. And I think if I was God, what would I do at that point? I think I might do something amazing. Like maybe I'd say, okay, look at this, and I'd just fling some stars into the sky. Or maybe I'd just create a new animal right in front of Moses' eyes and do something astonishing like that. Or maybe I'd pick up a mountain and just move it right in front of him. Like we've been singing about the God who moves the mountains. God could have done that. He could have just picked up a mountain and moved it, but he doesn't. He says to Moses, come up the mountain and I'll show you my glory. And what we see in Exodus 34, verse 6, is that when God reveals himself to Moses, the way he reveals his glory is he says, I'll pass by you. And he says, I'm the Lord, a God merciful and gracious, slow to anger and abounding in steadfast love. So when Moses was getting as close to God as it was possible for anyone to get at that point in time, at that point in history, the way God chose to reveal his glory, the primary way God identified himself was as a God merciful. That is who he is. So the beggar is coming to the very character, the very essence, the very nature of God when he cries out to Jesus and says, have mercy on me. The Bible also tells us that God is rich in mercy. He's rich in mercy. He's not stingy with it. He's not tight with it. It's something he is abundant and lavish with. We're told he's relentless in his mercy. His mercies never cease. They never come to an end. He is lavish with it, and every day there are new mercies for us. I know I need new mercy every day. I need the mercy of God every day. We're also told that God delights to show mercy. It's not something we have to twist his arm to do. He delights to show mercy. It's something he loves to do. You know, so often, particularly in kind of older film and TV depictions of Jesus, Jesus looks pretty miserable most of the time, I think. Don't you think? He looks quite somber. Perhaps not in some recent things like The Chosen, but in some older things, he looks quite stern, he looks quite somber. And yet, it says that he delights to show mercy. Imagine what it would be like if you could spit on some mud, pick up that mud, wipe it in someone's eyes, and then suddenly they can see when they've never been able to see before. Do you think you would look somber and stern as that happened? Wouldn't you probably be jumping up and down for joy just as much as the person who'd been healed? We're told that God delights to show mercy, that Jesus delights to show mercy. It's something he loves to do. So the beggar has come to Jesus at the exact point at which Jesus most wants to respond, that it gives Jesus' heart so much joy to go, yeah, I want to show mercy to you. The beggar has asked the perfect question because mercy is based on the giver, not on the receiver. It's based on the giver, not on the receiver. And one of the things I find truly incredible is that for those of us who follow Jesus, Jesus extends this incredibly wonderful invitation to us in Luke 6, verse 36, where he says to us, "Be merciful, just as your Father is merciful." We're invited to be like Jesus. We're invited to be like God. Now that might sound sort of irreverent, but it's right there. Jesus says it. Be merciful even as your Father is merciful. So for those of us who follow Jesus, we are invited to be like him in this way and to extend mercy that actually has nothing to do with the recipient and everything to do with the giver. And you know, during the pandemic, we've seen lots of things across our whole nation spring up that have been really, really good. Lots of people in our communities of different faiths, of no faith at all, have wanted to help their neighbour, have wanted to love their neighbour, actually. In Hastings, where I live, we've seen loads of projects. We've seen a mum and daughter who started delivering food to people just out their house because they knew they wanted to do something. They're not Christians, they've got no faith to speak of, but they just knew there was a need and they wanted to help. Lots of people do good to those around them. As Christians, we don't have the monopoly on good works. We don't. Lots of people want to do good to people around them. Lots of people even want to take it seriously to love their neighbours as themselves, or certainly to love their neighbours to a certain extent. But what makes the church distinctive, what makes followers of Jesus distinctive, is that we are called to have a radical and relentless mercy that is just like the mercy that God has shown us. Which means we're called to go further and push harder and not give up and not shrink back. So in my community at the minute, a lot of organisations that stepped up during the worst of the lockdowns that we've had so far are now starting to shrink back because they're like, well, we've done it. For me, I'm like, well, no, we're the church. We need to keep pushing forward. We need to keep helping people. People are broken. People's needs haven't gone away. Even if we feel like maybe, hopefully, the worst of the pandemic is behind us, the needs around us haven't gone away and the brokenness around us hasn't gone away. And we're called to be a people of mercy who bring mercy wherever it's needed. And like I said, the thing about the mercy of God is it's not dependent on the recipient. So one of the questions we often get asked at Jubilee Plus and in my local church, and I'm sure you've been asked it too in the various projects that you run, is, well, what if this person doesn't deserve our help? What if they got themselves into this mess? What if it's their own fault? What if they've just made bad decision after bad decision after bad decision? Well, do you know what? We're called to be those who extend mercy to those who don't deserve it. Because we're a people who have had mercy extended to us when we didn't deserve it. If I told you about every bad decision I've ever made in my life, we'd probably be here all day. We could probably be here for it would take me hours. I'm sure I can't even remember 10% of all the bad decisions or the things I've done wrong in my life. And yet God's mercy has been new for me every single day because it's not dependent on me. It's dependent on him. It's because it's who he is, a God merciful. Christians are called to be mercy bringers. It's something that sets us apart from people who aren't Christians. And if you're listening to this and you're not a Christian, the good news is that there's mercy for you today. That the merciful one wants you to know his mercy today and wants to transform you into a mercy bringer too. It's an open invitation. Anyone can come. Anyone can come and say, Jesus, I want you to be my Lord. I want mercy from you. Anyone can come and say, Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me. And he will, because he delights to show mercy. And then he will take your life and he will make you a mercy bringer. In the Bible, though, we see that God seems to have a particular bias when it comes to his mercy. That's something perhaps we don't often say about God being biased, don't we? We might talk about God not having any favourites. Or some people say, you're God's favourite, and it's everyone. Everyone's God's favourite. But God does have a bias that we see throughout the Bible, and his bias is towards the poorest. His bias is towards those who are trapped by poverty or injustice, those who are oppressed, those who are marginalised, those who are pushed out of society, those that everyone thinks have nothing to contribute and nothing to offer, are the very people that God rushes towards with his mercy. We see it in the life of Jesus. His whole ministry started in Luke chapter 4, where he reads from Isaiah 61. He says, "The Spirit of the Sovereign Lord is on me to bring good news to the poor, to bring sight to the blind," as he does in the life of this beggar. But it's about, so often when we talk about Jesus coming, we can use language, I don't know if you guys use it here, but of like this invasion from heaven to earth, or heaven being opened up, and then the things of heaven come down. God's will, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And so often when we use language like that, or we talk like that, we talk about healings and signs and wonders and miracles, which are all wonderful things. I would love to see a lot more of them. But we often neglect to talk about what it means for the poorest. But actually, when heaven opens, what happens to those in poverty is they get lifted up. In the Old Testament, in the Psalms, it says lifted out of the ash heap and seated with princes. God has an incredible vision for people whose lives are totally broken, for people who may not know where their next meal is coming from, people who may be trapped in debt. And it's not about whether they got there through their own decisions or not. It's about him being the merciful one and wanting to pour out his mercy. In Luke 6, just before Jesus says, "Be merciful even as your Father is merciful," the verse before it is he lists a load of things that we can do, like loving our enemies, like giving to those who don't have, lending without expecting it to be returned, things like that. But he also says, then you'll be like the Most High God, who is kind to, and then he says, not kind to those who are kind, not kind to those who try to pull themselves up and sort their lives out, not kind to those who are just doing the best they can and they really are trying and they've just had hard times. No, it says he is kind to the ungrateful and wicked. When I'm making a list of who I want to be kind to, it's not the ungrateful and wicked. The ungrateful and wicked, it's not just that they're at the bottom of the list. They're not even on my list of people I want to be kind to. Do you know if you hold a door open for someone and they don't say thank you, do you have a reaction to that? I really do, like a really bad reaction. What happens in my heart is I want to ask them to come back and then I want to slam the door in their face. Like, it's not nice, it's not pretty what comes out of me. Or if you let someone go in the car if you're driving and you're supposed to do that polite little hand gesture to say thank you. I have been known to do this at people who don't do that hand gesture to me because I want them to learn you're supposed to be thankful. I just let you go, you're supposed to be grateful. But our God is so merciful, so kind. He's even kind to the ungrateful and wicked. We are called to be merciful, not looking at the person in front of us and saying, do you deserve my help or not? But looking up at our God and saying, you're merciful and I want to be like you because Jesus says I can be like you, so I want to be like you. So I'm going to look up, not look in front of me. I'm not going to think, do you deserve my help or not? I'm going to think, does God want me to be merciful to you or not? And the answer to that is always yes. And what I find astonishing is that Jesus says to the beggar, what do you want me to do for you? It seems like it would have been a pretty obvious answer, doesn't it? But maybe it wasn't. Or maybe it was, but Jesus just wanted to hear it. So often the people around us in our communities in need, our starting place needs to be, like Jesus, what would you like me to do for you? So many people are coming to us, and if you're anything like me, I often think I've got the solutions. What you really need is not me to give you some money, it's to do this. What you really need is perhaps not me to help you out of debt, but me to teach you how to be good with your money. It's such a kind of attitude of superiority when we come like that, because actually Jesus met people at their point of immediate need. If you read the Gospels, you will see that Jesus often met people's immediate need first. Before he met their deepest need, before he looked at actually what is your biggest need, which was to know him, he dealt with the immediate need. So that meant when the 4,000 and the 5,000 were hungry, he gave them food. It meant when the wedding ran dry of wine, he provided wine. It meant that when the blind beggar comes and asks for his sight, Jesus provided sight. In fact, we see a lot of people in the Gospels where it seems that Jesus never met their deepest need. But that didn't stop him meeting their immediate need right where they were at. And one of the primary ways we get to display the mercy of God is by meeting the immediate needs of people around us. And doing that because we want to be merciful. And not saying, well, you can only get our help as long as you don't then mess up again, but saying, no, I want to show you the mercy of God. Now, so often when I talk about things like this, the first question is, well, what about wisdom? And often we pit wisdom and mercy against each other, but the Bible says in James that wisdom is full of mercy. Wisdom and mercy aren't opposed to each other. Yes, we might be wise in how we think about helping someone, but so often I use that as an excuse to then not be merciful. Wisdom is often another name that I give for my cynicism and my hard-heartedness. So yes, we want to be wise, but actually I think most of us, that cautiousness, that wisdom, that maybe even thinking, is this person going to do what they should do with the help that I give? That's the bit that comes naturally to us. But if we want to be like God, we need to cultivate hearts of mercy. We need to lean into it. We need to push into it. It doesn't happen by osmosis. It doesn't happen by listening to a talk about it. It doesn't happen by giving a talk about it. It happens when we pursue God and we say, you have been so merciful to me. You are the merciful one. And I want to be just like you, and I want to extend your mercy to those around me. I'd love to just pray, if that's all right. If you recognise you need to be more merciful, why don't you lift your hands or just, put your hand on your heart, whatever you feel comfortable to do. If you think, actually, do you know what? I need to grow in this. I want to be merciful like God. Father, I thank you that you are the merciful one. I thank you that it's in your very nature, it's who you are, a God merciful. I thank you, you delight to show mercy, and you invite us in, Jesus, to be those who can also delight to show mercy. Would you make it the delight of our hearts to show mercy, even where it's undeserved, especially where it's undeserved, God. Align our hearts with yours, God. Help us to be mercy bringers who reflect you to those around us by showing them your incredible, relentless, gracious, kind